Hi, folks. Welcome to the next edition of the SeverlessCraic, our podcast. My name's Dave Anderson. I'm a contributor and author at the Serverless Edge and technical fellow as our voice. Gentlemen.
Mark McCann, contributor, author at the Serverless Edge, stay-at-home dad, sorting out Christmas.
Michael O'Reilly, contributor at Serverless Edge, and also a software architect working with globalization partners.
Like when I first came across security decades ago, I remember thinking this is so complicated, and I made an effort to learn about it as much as I could. And as someone who's spoken at security conferences, I still am a complete amateur at security. It's so complicated. But I think the thing is that, sit down with security people, talk to them, understand what they're trying to do. And I've found huge value in when you're hit with a process that's difficult, understand what's the control behind the process, because the process is just trying to put in force a control, and they understand what the control is. So that's the goal. So and the security people will tell you this. So, well, the reason why this process exists is for this control. Say it's application security. And you say, well, what does that mean? So we don't want the source code tampered with. Okay, right. And then you can kind of, partner with them to find the best way of doing that. But if you fight the process, good luck. That's one. It's one way out of here. It's not going to work.
I think having that shared vocabulary, having a common language is critical. And I know we have had great success with threat modeling to help sort of bridge some of that common sort of language and common vocabulary. And threat modeling as a technique has been awesome, not only for good application design, but also for having those conversations with our security partners and security teams around, well, here's the threats that we have identified. Is that what you think? And here's what we're doing to mitigate it. And as you mentioned, Dave, there are these controls we want to meet. We want to meet them in as automated a fashion as possible. So we want to bake it into our CI/CD pipelines. We want to bake it into our building block constructs that we use to deliver these services. And ideally, we then get these reviewed and approved by the security team upstream, so that whenever a developer comes along and composes the next application, they're building it from securely hardened, approved building blocks that allow them to go fast, but go fast securely.
Yeah. Threat model's a brilliant one. I think it's worth talking about some techniques that how do you make security easier. But do you remember, Mike, I don't mind naming them. Like the first project that you and I brought threat modeling in, we spoke to a security guy, a guy called Bill Pelletier, he's a good friend of mine. And he was just like, no, you're not doing this. So we went off and discover threat model and worked out how to do it, and then came back to him with the threat model. And I was expecting another tough time, but he was like, this is amazing. I love what you've done, but you've missed something. And we were like, brilliant. I didn't know I missed that. So I couldn't believe how warm a reception that, and I've experienced that ever since. When you do come to the security team and say, this is what I think you want to do, and this is how I think we should do it, you're opening up that conversation. So I think that's a brilliant technique.
Yeah, I think so. I remember that well. That was a long time ago, maybe 15 years, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's the Microsoft threat modeling.
Right.
Yeah, so it kind of uses Stride, and it's very application centric. And what I really like about that threat modeling technique is it doesn't have to have a security professional involved in the process. So it's it can be the manager, the engineer, the product owner. They can all be in a room together, kind of working through that process and following that Stride exercise. So it's actually quite a fun activity as well, but it's a really good way of designing security into your your workload or your whatever you're doing. And then at the end of it, in terms of validating it, it was let's walk that through with a cybersecurity architect or somebody in the know on the security end. And the process is actually really, really good. And again, it's the application stuff. It's kind of what we said at the start of the call. We're taking responsibility for design and security into our system. And we've been doing these for a long time now. And there's never been a threat modeling exercise where we haven't surfaced value, or requirements that we've just got to address. So it's such a phenomenal approach. to being proactive about security. And I know, like Mark, you've kind of mentioned there, there's other supporting things are like the OWASP top 10 for serverless. From a reactive side, there's tons of tools that we can kind of look at. I know, Mark, if you kind of want to mention any of those, or
I have a funny story with threat modeling. I'll be careful how I tell this, but I was trying to convince a team to do threat modeling, and I was talking to the security lead, and he wasn't sure if it worked or not, and it was quite a high-profile project. And I said, let's just try it and see what happens, because I knew the engineer team. They basically sat beside me where I was sitting. So I says, well, let's run a quick pilot. So I walked over to the security, and he said, we've been all over this. We've spent months. This thing it's bulletproof. And I said, okay, well, let's threat model. Let's see what happens. And I walked over to the engineers, and I says, is there any security problems you see in that thingy? And they went, yeah, there's a loophole how you can log into the application, but it's going to be fixed later. Right. And I was all right. It's something to do with a token that was implemented incorrectly, but the team thought it was going to be fixed later. So we threat modeled and highlighted 2 or 3 issues. When they came back, it realized that there was a break in communication between the security requirement and the implementation. Now, it was a dead easy fix, but the engineers just thought, well, someone else will fix this. And the security guys thought, well, this has been all implemented. It was a very, very minor misunderstanding, which was caught before anything went live. But
I think there's a key point there that we've been big proponents of this. It's assume nothing, but it's also these collaborative, facilitated, team-based activities surface so much value, because you get a diverse group of people in a room and you work it through or on a Zoom call, and there's such great discovery of ideas and things that you haven't thought about, like threat modeling, the way we do well-architected reviews. It's always team focused, it's always collaborative and facilitative, and a safe space for people to surface exactly that. Dave, it's like, oh, you haven't thought about this. Oh, yeah. Right. Well, let's think about that then.
Yeah. It's always like with all this stuff, you always have a good tool set, you have a good design. The thing that'll catch you out is probably a break in communication somewhere. Yeah. And the best way to catch that is make it a team event, Yeah.
And as an architect, I think it's a really good exercise for making sure you understand how teams are going about certain things as well. So you're constantly validating thinking, so when you're kind of walking through, the Microsoft threat model, you're building out DFDs, data flow diagrams, and you're constantly reaffirming, is this talking to here? What are we doing? What are we passing across? And then, you can use it to weave in the organization's information, data privacy kind of policies. And you can kind of, well, what type of data are we moving? Which is a big aspect of what application developers are all doing. It's all really about movement of information and how we're protecting that information, things like that. So it's such a good thing. And then, even looking at post-production, looking at people say, well, we've got all the static analysis in place and stuff like that. Well, you can still design insecure systems, that maybe something like an SC, static code analysis thing won't pick up on, or, so you gotta take that stuff quite seriously. And the other one last point on the threat modeling piece, I know we're kind of beating it to death, but what I really like about it is when you get into the mitigations, and then how do you verify your mitigations, then that kind of leads you down the path of how do we get creative around testing this is not a problem, so you're arming the engineers with ways to test the system and through a different perspective, and you look at different techniques around that, like Mark, I'm sure you love talking about chaos engineering and all that stuff, and
like we mentioned at the start, how do you then meet those controls in an automated fashion? How do we, here's our test. Okay, can we bake it into our pipeline? Can we run it every single time that we make a change? It's that sort of constant evolution, constant security improvements that we go to. I think the other technique that we love is the well-architected sort of review process. And we've written about this in the SCORP process that we've written up as well. But what we had found very valuable is to ask the teams to do a threat model before they go into their well-architected review. And you spend 5-10 minutes just going over your threat model before you kick off the well-architected review session. And that gives so much context and gives so much value to the team who are then going into that well-architected review. You find that then the well-architected review becomes very, very slick, very fast, because they've thought about a lot of the boundary conditions and what way the data flows, and they can visualize it very clearly. So, as a tip or a technique, doing a threat model first before you do your well-architected review just adds so much value,
so much context.
And another great piece of that is the security champion, identifying a developer who'd be a security champion. And like, this isn't always the most senior developer. It's just a developer who's interested in security. And you don't give them a badge and a baton and say, okay, you start knocking heads. You really say, well, we're going to spend extra effort to inform this person so they learn all the controls and process, etc., so they can then help out the team. So it's a win-win for everyone when that happens.
Yeah, one of the big enablers we also was baking in the security guardrails into your environment as much as possible. And there's a fine balancing act there between stopping things going ahead, and what we always had in the ecosystem we've worked in, we've had guardrails in place that almost give you the baseline security, encryption at rest, encryption at transit, everything was tagged, there's a whole sort of foundational layer. Now you can use tools like AWS config or SEP and a few other things to put that in place, but having those enabling constraints in place allow you then to have a higher order conversation about proper application security.
That's a really good point, and I think it complements that security design. Like, so we were introducing a team to serverless in this organization, and one of the things we did do as part of that was introduce like CFN lint and CFN nag. And CFN nag is a very opinionated sort of validator that will go through your cloud formation and kind of highlight things that maybe could be tightened up, which is a really good way of, kind of being proactive around, asking ourselves, have we went out with the most secure settings? Should we be looking at sort of defaults or encryption? And is our resource policy a wild card? So you gotta, those sorts of things can really help, find things that maybe slip through the cracks there in relation to the implementation. So there's tons of good tools out there.
Yeah. So in summary, I guess serverless is more secure. Do threat modeling, do well-architected reviews, have some security champions, establish some good guardrails, and automate the hell out of everything.
100%.
And talk to your security department. They're not evil. They don't have horns.
Absolutely.
All right, folks. Well, that's the crack. Good fun. So more about on the serverlessedge.com blog, and on Twitter we're on at serverlessedge. So thanks very much. Thank you.
Bye.